Hello, everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast. I am Nathaniel Rutherford, the managing editor of RockyTopInsider.com, and I'm joined once again by both Matt Ray and Brandon Martin of VR2. Guys, we went for a little bit without doing some of these episodes, and now we've got two in a span of like 3 or 4 days. So we're getting right back on top of this. The dead period's over, so that's one reason why we have more news and stuff to share. And that was on display fully this weekend when Tennessee had a huge contingent of prospects coming in from North Carolina, from the Northeast, and some just all kinds of places coming out from Alabama and everything else as well. And Tennessee this weekend picked up 2 commitments. One of them from a kid who had already been committed to Tennessee once before, decommitted, and then recommitted, and another one from a defensive back prospect down in Alabama. As mentioned, Isaac Washington first, the defensive tackle from Pilot Mountain, North Carolina. We don't have to sit here and break down kind of what we feel about his game because we talked about him, probably a month and a half, 2 months ago when he first committed to Tennessee back in January. Then he announced not even a month later that he was decommitting because Tracy Rocker moving on. And then he comes in this weekend and he meets Jimmy Brumbaugh for the first time in person, gets to talk with him, and he decides, I'm going to go ahead and recommit. Matt, Brandon, I know, Matt, you mentioned that we both talked about this. All three of us talked about this on the last podcast, but I know you also mentioned it in the insider notes and stuff on VR2.site. Was this really a big surprise that he went ahead and decided to go ahead and pull the trigger? And, it looks to me like Jimmy Brumbaugh had a very strong weekend, not just with Washington, but with a lot of these defensive linemen who came and visited this weekend.
Yeah, Jimmy Brumbaugh had a great weekend. Like I mentioned it before, I think it's his best opportunity to recruit, and he has hit the ground running. I talked about it a couple weeks back when the contact period started back. But as soon as Brumbaugh got on the job, him and Washington started trying to make that relationship. Maybe a mild surprise that he's back in the boat, but Tennessee wanted him back in quickly. They didn't beat around the bush about that. And, he wanted to be at Tennessee. It would kind of be foolish for him to not at least re-examine things. I think it was probably I think there was a little concern when he decommitted. He had a really good bond with Tracy Rocker, and I know Rocker caught a lot of flack, but Washington is a guy that he had a really good bond with. And, maybe that was an effort from Rocker trying to turn up his ability in the 2021 class. But Brumbaugh come back in and put, he closed the job now. He's got to keep it. He's got to keep it that way. But I don't think Washington's going to waver this time. I think he really likes Tennessee. Yeah, he backed off, but he wanted to get right back down there as quickly as he could. He did that, and he's right back in. And I think Brumbaugh's going to be a really good recruiter for Tennessee down the stretch here.
Brandon, we've all talked about, all three of us have talked about, Washington as a player and how, we think his offer list and his film, now that his junior film is out, it actually wasn't out when he committed originally, but his junior film is out now, and it's even more impressive than his sophomore film. We've all talked about how we think his rating doesn't match his offer list, doesn't match his film, but, I think Tennessee wanted him not just for his skill and his ability, but I definitely think what played into trying to get him in the boat early, especially, is the fact that he has he's from North Carolina and he has a lot of relationships with a lot of the other North Carolina kids that Tennessee is trying to get in the boat for this 2021 class.
Well, he's got a lot of strong bonds to the other North Carolina kids, like you said. And he's also, I think he's going to be one of the guys before this is over with who's going to kind of rocket up the recruiting rankings. He's everything that you could want to see from Washington, everything you could want to see him improve, want to see him do better, any holes you can find in his game are all fixed with coaching. You can correct and develop every shortcoming that he's got, and the physicality is there, and I know the level of competition is not what a lot of people would like to see. He plays at a very small school, but on tape he does what he's supposed to do when you're a really good athlete playing at the smallest school, or playing at a much smaller school, and that's he dominates the guys across from him. He does his part. He's a guy that's going to come up these recruiting rankings. I think it's going to kind of soar. And man, Mac Brown is on a tear right now in North Carolina with a lot of really good prospects. I think one of the reasons Tennessee would like to get him in the boat is he's got a lot of ties to those North Carolina kids that Tennessee wants in this class and that Tennessee wants to sign. Obviously, Tennessee wants Isaac Washington for him. They want him for what he brings to the table. Period. I mean, he apparently the staff was just ecstatic. They got him back in the boat. They were thrilled, and he's a guy they really like for what he brings. And those relationships are going to be important as well, helping to get other guys there. But I think they probably wanted to get him before he blew up, and Mac Brown started trying to kick his door down.
Yeah, Mac Brown is, like you said, he's killing it. We'll actually touch on Mac Brown here in a second, too, that it doesn't even involve a North Carolina kid, but we'll talk about him here in a minute, too. The other guy who committed to Tennessee over the weekend, and I'll actually keep this in with you, Brandon, first, because you and I both do a lot of the film analysis stuff on these recruits, but that is Edwin White, who I watched his film. You can just look at his stats and tell, too. He is a true do-it-all type of player. He plays on offense, not as much anymore, but he plays on offense. He plays a lot on defense. He plays on special teams, and he has scored in every phase of the game in his high school career. And just as his junior season last year, he's returned kickoffs for touchdowns, punts, interceptions. He's scored in rushing touchdowns. He's scored in receiving touchdowns. As a junior last year, he picked off 9 passes as a junior and totaled almost 90 tackles. I think he returned 2 of them for touchdowns as well. In his high school career, in his 3 seasons down in Alabama and Mobile, he has intercepted 18 passes. And he's a guy who scored, I think, 16 career touchdowns, and I think he's scored 3 defensive touchdowns, then like 9 on offense, and then 4 on special teams. I know, numbers like that, as you were just talking about with Washington, if it's in a smaller district or whatever, those numbers can be deceiving sometimes. But when I watched this film, Brandon, while, yes, I will concede he is a little slow. He looks a little bit kind of like Nigel Warrior to me as far as he's not going to be the fastest guy out there. But I am very impressed by his ball hawking ability. And like I just said earlier, he is a true do-it-all type player who makes plays in all 3 phases of the game for the prep school he plays for down in Mobile.
The thing with White, when I watch him on film, is how deep do they start this kid? Because he just... half of his highlights are just him coming in. You're like, oh, this is an overthrown ball, or somebody got beat deep on a 40 or 50 yard bomb, and then he comes in from the far frame and makes these plays, and you're just going, how deep are they playing him? He's a do-it-all safety. I think he looks more like a kind of one of the more traditional, what you used to think of as a free safety. You don't really see the distinction between the free and the strong safety as much anymore. It's just you just play safety. But he's one of those old free safety types that you're going to put back and let him get in center field and just roam. And if quarterback makes a mistake, he's going to make you pay for it. He has outstanding ball skills, very good at high pointing the ball. You look at him on film and go, well, he looks like he may be a step slow, and then you just watch him eat up grass on a play and wind up right in front of the receiver as the ball gets there. You keep seeing him do that, well, maybe he's not that slow. I don't know. But really good hands. He's always around the ball. He's a willing tackler. He'll come up and play the run. He reads against the run well. He's not a big hitter. He's not that big of a safety. You talked about he's got some similarities to Nigel Warrior. Now, he's not going to hit you like Nigel would. He's not that big. He's not that strong yet. He's not going to lay the lumber to you like Warrior would. But I think he's probably better in coverage than Warrior was when he came out. Again, good ball skills, goes to get interceptions. He's one of those guys that just a ball hawk. He's around the ball. He gets turnovers. He makes impact plays on defense by getting turnovers. And it's really hard. At least on film, it looks like it is really difficult to take the top off of a defense that he's playing safety for. I don't know if it's because they play him so deep. I don't know if it's because he ranges back that deep. Maybe they're just really comfortable letting him truly play center field and just play back and let him knock anything down that people want to try to hit over the top with him, but he's really good at it. I think he's a little raw, but I believe he's a good find for Tennessee, and I think he's a kid you could see rise up the boards a little bit. He's a good athlete.
Yeah, I think all that's fair. Like you said, he's not as big of a hitter as Warrior is or was, or even coming out of high school. But I do like his game overall, and I'll be very intrigued to see if he does camps and stuff over the summer. When I interviewed him, he mentioned, you talked about playing free safety. He mentioned that's what Tennessee was selling him on, is playing him as a free safety and sometimes as a nickel. So he mentioned that himself, that they've used the term free safety for him in his recruitment process. And before we kind of switch gears here a little bit, Matt, I want to throw a question over you that I meant to mention before we hit record here, but I forgot to. But now Tennessee, over this weekend, pick up 2 commitments, got Washington back on the boat, got White just then. They have 7 commitments in this class right now, in the 2021 class. But and they're currently ranked, I think, 12th in the country, number 2 in the SEC, but this is obviously still very early on in the 21 cycle. But you look at the class, and you have 1 4-star in Jordan Mosley. You have Elijah Howard, who in the composite is barely a top 600 player, but he is on the cusp of being a 4-star on the 247 rankings. But other than that, I mean, you look at all the guys Tennessee has committed, and every other player, at least on the composite rankings, they're outside of the top 600. You have Edwin White, who's 608. You have Nate Evans, 615. Jay Jones, 625. Isaac Washington, 665. Darrell Jackson isn't even ranked in the composite, but he's a number. You've got like an 87 rating on 247 Sports, which for some reason they've stopped showing their national rankings on some of their stuff, and they just have the position and the state. But I've seen some people on Twitter and stuff talk about, why are we taking all these commitments from these lower rated guys early on, or is the plan to recruit over them, or are these just filler spots? Matt, what is your take on that? Because I think some of this, we've seen this staff do this before with kids in the 2019 and 2020 classes both. Take commitments from kids who were rated a little bit lower early on, and a lot of them end up sticking, but we have seen some of those guys, you can think of Lovie Jenkins in the last cycle as an example too, of they do end up eventually getting recruited over, or I wonder if some of these kids are guys that Pruitt and this staff liked in camps initially, and they want to see how they develop down the line and whether or not they'll end up staying in this class or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see this a lot. I mean, Lovie Jenkins is a guy I come back to. Look at, and again, another guy I was actually thinking about yesterday is Art Green. Mm-hmm. He was the number 1 junior college cornerback in the country and like the number 2 player in the country on part of the junior college rankings at one point. But the thing about this staff is they never quit evaluating you. So, like Brandon talked about with White, they see stuff right now that they think they can fix. But when they keep watching your film and evaluating you, if they don't think they can fix it, they're going to, and they have another opportunity, they're going to move on. So, I mean, like you've got Art Green, he's currently not committed anywhere. And I've had people say, well, Tennessee could have certainly used another defensive back in this class. Why didn't they stick with Green? He's not committed anywhere. Well, there's something that fell off. By the time his senior season was over at Hutchinson, he wasn't even really getting that much playing time there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think regardless of who you are, this staff could recruit over you. But I do like several of these guys. Like you've got Elijah Howard, who, like you mentioned, is not receiving some of the recognition that he probably should. And I'm not sure what all goes into those evaluations, but you've got Howard, who has world-class speed. The evaluators have showed that they covet that. Look at Arian Smith last year. Howard's coming off a season where he basically carried Baylor to an undefeated or a 1-loss regular season, a good playoff run, and he was a Mr. Football finalist. So, where do some of these rankings come from? And that's where I like to tell people between that, like probably that 700 line up to even almost probably 250, there's not a lot separating these guys. There's quirks that need to be fixed. There are issues, but it's so tough for them to grade those guys. Like, just because you're 700 don't necessarily mean you're that far behind, 300. It's just, it seems like a huge gap, but it's just like a few small things, So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see Tennessee recruit around some of these guys, but we'll see what happens. I mean, the Nate Jones kid is a kid I haven't really evaluated that much, but it seems like Tennessee really likes him, and I think Edwin White is pretty good at his craft. I do think he's a touch slow, but Jawan Jennings is a touch slow. Sometimes you just make your game work around stuff like that, and he's proven that he can do that. He plays in a good classification in Alabama. He plays in 4A. They just went 14-0 and 15-0, whatever, and won a state title. So, I mean, he's proven that he can be effective at a high level of competition, but we'll see how the evaluation goes. I would like to see his tested numbers this summer. He's planning to compete at some camps. He has really, really bulked up, though. The first thing he told me when I interviewed him was, I don't weigh 160, I weigh 196 now.
Wow.
Woo! He's really proud of that. Like, I think the original 247 and Rivals weight had him about like 168 or something like that. And I got the message right here. The first thing he told me was, I weigh 196 now. When he agreed to doing an interview, this was it. He said, yes. It was 175. I'm sorry. He said, yes, but I want you to know I'm not 175. I'm 196 now.
Man.
So that was very important to him. That's a big safety. That's a big safety.
He's already around 6'1", so that's pretty good size coming out of high school.
Yeah.
Well,
so
something else to keep in mind with these guys that we're talking about, is Tennessee going to recruit over them? Is Tennessee going to recruit over them? Why they're taking these lower rated guys? I'm going to point you to a few guys from the last couple classes. One's Jalen Hyatt. Mm-hmm. Hyatt was a guy that committed early, and when he committed, he was in about this range, about the range we're talking about. He was a 3-star, despite having good tape, despite having a lot of success on the field. And all he did was go out and tear the top off of his senior season, and now he's a guy that we're talking about may play as a true freshman. And the rankings as the season went on, it took to late in the season, but eventually changed to reflect that. I think that's very much probably going to happen to Elijah Howard. I think Howard and Hyatt are going to be similar in the way their recruitment and their rankings progress. We'll talk about Roman Harrison. That's another guy that had committed to Tennessee. At the time that he committed, he was a 3-star guy in about this range. A lot of people go, why are we taking this kid this early? By the end of the season, he's a 4-star player. He was player of the year for his classification, MVP of the state title game. So, I mean, you saw him develop. Elijah Simmons. People have seen the athletic freak that young man is. He was another guy. He's in this range. And his rankings never went above a 3-star. He stayed there, but then showed the kind of incredible athlete he was. So this staff also, some of the guys I just named off are some of the guys in the last 2-3 years that Tennessee fans have been the most excited to get in the boat, mm-hmm. and the most excited about to have in the class. And they're guys that were ranked right in this window at this time. I think it's kind of fair to give Pruitt and this staff. Are some of these guys going to get recruited over? Probably.
Yeah.
But they are also pretty confident that some of them are going to develop and be really good and probably end up rated higher than they are right now. And they've got the track record to show that. So I think that's important to weigh into this as well.
Two other names I'll throw in there before we change subject here. Jimmy Callaway was right around the 750 mark. When he first committed to Tennessee. He finished up a top 200 player, or right around top 200 player on 247. And Javonte Spraggins is a guy who, when he first committed to Tennessee, had an 85 rating on 247 Sports, and he ended up finishing up with an 89 rating, which is a pretty big jump between June of 2019 all the way to when he signed with Tennessee in late January, where they last evaluated him. That's a 4 rating. He's a borderline 4-star player on the 247 regular rankings there. So those are two other guys who had big jumps, and those are guys, obviously, we haven't seen what they can do yet, but those are two other guys in the 2020 class. You mentioned Jalen Hyatt, who kind of shot up the recruiting board for Tennessee, even though they took those guys early in the cycle, and they ended up becoming some pretty good, hopefully we'll see, some pretty good players in Tennessee's 2020 class. One last thing here before we go back to, I guess we'll kind of switch gears a little bit here and talk about a Tennessee-adjacent recruiting story, and then get back to more Tennessee-specific stuff. Brandon and Matt, we saw over the weekend a guy who we've talked about here on the podcast, and actually we were asked on the last podcast who are the top 5 in-state prospects Tennessee needs to go after in this 2021 cycle, and I believe we all said Eli Sutton was one of them. Well, Tennessee's still going to pursue him, but we mentioned Mac Brown earlier, kind of killing it in recruiting right now. He got a commitment from Eli Sutton over the weekend, and Sutton's a kid who is very smart, and he's a very good player, and I think academics played into a little bit of it as well. Maybe, I'm not sure, but he committed to UNC over the weekend. How surprising was that? I'll give it to you, Brandon, first, because I know you were kind of passionate about it, but I'll ask you both. How surprising was it to see Sutton go ahead and pull the trigger and commit the Tar Heels?
I wasn't really surprised that it was North Carolina. He has liked North Carolina. He has talked about them for a while. He's got several ACC schools that have pursued him hard, and he showed a lot of interest in, and that he's liked, and he likes the academics. So I'm not surprised it's a North Carolina. It's an ACC school. It's a strong academic school. The football program is good. They're throwing the ball a lot, and he's going to get to do a lot of pass pro out there. And that's where he shines and where he's going to have a chance to make his money going forward, because I do believe the NFL is down the road in his future. So I wasn't stunned that it was North Carolina. I was surprised he committed this early. That did surprise me. I thought he would probably be a kid that would commit sometime during the season. I'm really torn on how I think this is going to go, because he's had a lot of offers and he's had a lot of teams after him for a long time. Part of me wants to say that I think as a senior, when he sees some of these other programs really get down to business and start ratcheting up the recruiting on him, and he starts seeing how serious some other programs are, I could see him backing off this and reopening his options. But there's another part of it that wouldn't be surprised for him to just be done. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised about that at all. He is very focused on this senior year. It wouldn't shock me for him to be done, to shut it down, and be able to focus on this senior year and have it over with. So it's a big get for Mac Brown. I've said before, I think he's best left tackle in the country. I don't think there's a better pass blocker in the country better pass protector than him in the country this year, and that includes some of the guys that are 5 stars. And I've said for about a year now that he should have a 5th star. So I stand by that. I think it hurts, but it's a big get for Mac Brown.
Matt, is there anything you'd want to add to that before we move on here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like Brian. I'm not too surprised that it was UNC. I think for Sutton, I don't think a lot of schools probably expected him to make a decision this early, which is fine. I mean, he's made his rounds. He's made several visits, and schools staying in and out of contact with him. When you talk to him, Tennessee was kind of more hit or miss with him. T. Martin's the area recruiter. But they haven't recruited the mid-state terribly hard. I think Eli's a pretty good prospect. I'm interested to see, like Brandon said, I am interested to see who ratchets things up and who tries to make this recruitment interesting. I think a lot of his decision was academic-based. I mean, when you look at where he was going to visit, coming up at Northwestern, Duke, UNC is a really good academic school. So I think he based a lot of it around that, and I mean that's fine. I mean he's coming out of Brentwood Academy. He's more than prepped for that, and UNC just went 8-5. Sam Howell's going to be a really high draft pick when he comes out. They're going to put some receivers in the league coming soon. Mac Brown's a good coach. Got Dre Ba coaching DBs. You're in the ACC. You're not putting all that necessary wear and tear on your body. I do think, like Brandon said, that Sutton's a better pass protector than he is a run blocker. I think that suits his game a little bit more. I don't think he's the best left tackle in the country like Brandon, but Brandon saw him a lot and rightfully so has evaluated his game pretty heavily. And that's not a knock at Eli, because I do think he's a good prospect and he's a really good kid, and he's always been really easy to work with for us. But I think he fell a little bit down Tennessee's board, and again, that's not a knock. Tennessee could come back in November and say, "Oh boy, we should have made a little bit more of a move there." And oddly enough, it's a strange situation because the tackle position is so important this time, and you're swinging at guys like Amarius Mims and Nolan Rucci, and you got Terrence Ferguson who can play outside or inside, Dylan Fairchild who can play outside or inside. You got William Griffin, but I don't think Griffin is quite the quality of tackle that Sutton probably is, especially from a pass protector standpoint. I think he's probably more suited to be a right tackle, and maybe even play in at some guard. But it's a situation that could definitely be revisited. Like I told Brandon when it happened, I said it's probably a situation that could be revisited. I said, because if you do strike out, then you have to try to get back in the race. That's not to say you can't, but North Carolina, I mean, they're a hot team right now. So that's going to be interesting to watch.
You mentioned a name there that I want to get to and to kind of transition to our last point here. A name that could ease the blow if Tennessee, does end up trying to go back for Sutton and can't get him. One that Tennessee seemed to make a pretty good movement with this past weekend. We talked about Jimmy Brumbaugh having a strong weekend. Well, it seems like Will Friend had a pretty good weekend too. He had 5-star Nolan Rucci on campus, and you got to talk with him. Matt, you all have an article on VR2.site where you got to interview Nolan Rucci. He's a massive human being. He's 6'8", 290. I'm looking at the picture you have on the site of him, and he looks like he's making this kid look like a kid. I mean, the guy who's coming up after number 5 on the opposing defense there just looks like a child next to Rucci. He just looks gigantic. What were your takeaways from him? And he's another guy who is a future aerospace engineer. I think we need to get Josh Dobbs on the phone to talk with him and to make a sales pitch for Tennessee. But what was your takeaway from his interview with about Will Friend, about the visit? And then also, I don't know who else you have gotten a chance to talk to, but which is kind of the overall vibe from the other visitors that have been on campus this past weekend, because Tennessee had a ton of guys on campus this past weekend.
Yeah, so I spent a pretty good bit of time on the phone with Rucci last night, mainly because he gave great detailed answers and was very down to earth and really enjoyed his trip. But you said the key word when you asked the question, or 2 keywords, Will Friend. Man, he raved about Will Friend. He got to spend one-on-one time because he came through on a Sunday. He could care less about the junior day hoopla. It's just another photo shoot to him. That's not a big deal. And most of these national recruits like that, they could care less about that. They want the one-on-one time with the coach. They're trying to figure out where they go fit in, who's going to coach them, who's going to get them to the next level. So he got plenty of time to sit down and talk with Friend, and he really enjoyed it. Pruitt in on the conversation as well. His dad played in the league at New England for about 7 years in the 90s. They knew similar people. He thought that was the neatest thing ever, being from Pennsylvania. I'm sorry, not from Pittsburgh. Being from Pennsylvania and coming down here to the South, meeting these guys, and they know the same people that his dad knows, and they're able to talk and relate about that. He really liked the way Coach Friend taught, the technique that he's teaching, and he sees an opportunity at Tennessee. I think it kind of floored him a little bit. He went into it with an open mind. He's very intelligent, going into aerospace engineering, obviously, but he went into that visit with an open mind, and it paid off for him. He got to see the academic side of things. He got to talk to a student that's currently in the program. He enjoyed everything that he saw about Tennessee. He is planning to get back. He's planning around a July decision. He doesn't know how he's going to take his visits. He's not terribly worried about that. He's visited a lot of schools. Now he's got to go back home and say, hey, I want to see this school practice again, or I want to see this school officially before I make my decision. So, Clemson is another team that he mentioned pretty heavily. So he's looking outside of Pennsylvania, and he likes Penn State, and that's where his dad played. So, that's an uphill battle. They're recruiting him heavily. Ohio State's in the mix there. So Tennessee could fool around and get an official visit from him. And a kid with an open mind like that, sometimes you can tell when you talk to these kids sometimes, like, He gave them a chance, but that's pretty much it. I think you don't see many kids with an open mind as much as Rucci. I think Friend made a big impression. He's going to stay in contact with him, and he's going to give Will Friend a chance. And again, I mentioned this to somebody. Will Friend is sudden. I think I might have mentioned on the last podcast. Will Friend is suddenly one of the, he not suddenly, he was, but he's arguably one of the top offensive line coaches in the country. Top 3 if you really want to get down to it, as far as his resume and what he's done. So he's going to keep Tennessee in these battles. And his first go around, he won 2 with Darnell Wright and Wanye Morris. So we'll see what happens. But Tennessee definitely made a move with him. I guess you asked about some other moves as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kamaro Edmonds. I'm sorry. I've spent most of the day talking back and forth, exchanging messages with him. Tennessee did really well there. Jay Graham was big in this one. They talked about football a lot, but they talked outside of football, and that meant a lot to him. I think Tennessee positioned themselves nicely there. Dylan Brooks is just a man of few words, so few words. But Tennessee's still right there in the thick of that race. I talked to Peyton Page briefly this morning, and still, waiting to go back and forth with him and see what happens. But Tennessee, Jimmy Brumbaugh did a great job with Page this weekend, and that's the first thing that Page mentioned was that Brumbaugh, the connection with Brumbaugh happened quick. So we'll see where that goes. Trying to think back on who else. Obviously, Edwin White committed.
I don't know about all just the guys you've talked to, but I got to see Junior Colson this weekend and talk with him. And after seeing him a few times and listening to Junior a little bit, I think Tennessee. I know people all over the country want him, but I think Tennessee may fool around and win that one. I think they're in a. He didn't visit this past weekend. He visited the weekend before, but I think Tennessee's in a really good place on that one.
That's good to know, because Colson's, as we've all said, he's a very good prospect in the state of Tennessee this year.
Yeah, I think so too, Brand. I think Tennessee's gonna be in that one until the end, and I think they've got a really good chance there. I'm just trying to think back, look through some notes here. Jabari Ritzy, he's really hard to get a hold of. Braden Davis. It's
hard to remember because Tennessee had some guys in town.
Braden Davis is the son of Anton Davis and a 2022 top 100 quarterback, and interviewed him on Saturday evening, and he really enjoyed the trip, and they'll obviously make the trip back several times now that he's a national recruit. But I think Tennessee did a really good job there, and I mentioned in the insider notes, Tennessee, they're going to have to look for a quarterback in 2022, but they're not going to have to look too far. They're going to get a really good quarterback in that class. So you have Caden Martin, who has offers nationally. You have Ty Simpson, who's in state. Tevin Carter is a kid out of Memphis that has some bigger offers. You got Braden Davis. They're going to get a really good quarterback in that class. They're going to land one of those guys. So.
Did you say Ty Simpson as well?
Yeah, Ty Simpson. Yes, sir. I haven't got to talk with him about how his visit went. I'm supposed to talk to him this afternoon. We'll see how that goes. But he always enjoys every trip. So I'm sure he will just be looking a little deeper at it this time around. So we'll see how things go there.
Yeah, Tennessee's not going to have any trouble, you'd think, at landing a high-profile elite quarterback in the 22 class. It's going to be interesting to see if they land who they can land in this 21 class, because I think we may have talked about this before in a previous podcast, that with how prevalent transfers are now, especially at the quarterback position, it probably it would behoove Tennessee and probably every school to get at least one, if not maybe two quarterbacks every cycle. So I think Tennessee will get one in this class. Is it Christian Veilleux? Is it the Miller kid that that they offered not too long ago? So I think who they get in this class will be interesting, because you have Harrison Bailey right there as a freshman, but the 22 kids, Bailey will be a junior at that point when they're coming in here. So you'd imagine they might think they can beat him out, but they also, if they don't, he's probably just a year away from leaving or so. So they think their playing time will be pretty soon. So that's going to be an interesting storyline to keep up with in that next recruiting cycle. But
speaking of quarterbacks, Caden Salter was supposed to make it out this weekend. He did not. He will be here Thursday.
Okay.
So that's another top 100 quarterback coming through campus. That's across 2 classes. That's 3 in less than a week's time. So Jeremy Pruitt believes in stacking those elite quarterbacks up, and you have to if you're going to win.
Yep. I was about to say you have to. Well, I think that'll go ahead and do it for the main part of this podcast. I'll let you guys plug stuff here in a second, but we do appreciate all of you listening in to another episode of the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast. Guys, I know you've got a lot of stuff on the site, and Brandon, I saw posting some videos to Twitter on @_VR2_ of some of the campus stuff you were at. Let you plug that, and then Matt, let you plug some other stuff you have on the site coming up. But do check out VR2.site because they already have some interviews up there of some of the kids who visited this weekend. Insider Notebook, if you're not a member of that, it's only $3 a month. That's cheaper than a cup of coffee or a cup of whatever you want to get at Starbucks, so that you're going to miss out on one of those a month, and you're going to get a lot of good content and a lot of good interaction from the guys at VR2. So check them out. But yeah, Brandon, talk about the videos you got and the work you got to see this weekend, and then Matt, let everybody know what else y'all have coming down the wire.
Just the stuff that you're going to see from the camps that I've been going to. I think I left on Saturday with 9 or 10 interviews. So wow. We're going to be running video interviews all week of guys that have got Tennessee offers. Most of them are 2021 guys. There's a few 2022 guys sprinkled in there. You're talking about guys that a lot of them, when I saw them, were 1 week removed from coming to visit Tennessee. We had a chance to see them in Gatlinburg, and a lot of these guys left Gatlinburg and went to Knoxville. And then I saw them at the Music City Showdown in Nashville this past week. We've run some highlights of those guys. We're going to run an article in the next day or two that is kind of the notes from some of the camps that we've been to, the guys we've seen that have stood out, some of our takeaways, some names to know, guys that have flown under the radar. Got an interview coming with a guy that I talked with you about, Nathaniel, that I think may be a little bit of a diamond in the rough coming out. A young man named Bryce Goodner out of McMinn County, the Tennessee's starting to talk to a little bit. Had a really, really interesting interview with him. That's another very, very intelligent young man. We were talking about some of these guys in this current class that are very bright. There's another one.
Yep. So
there's going to be several things coming out. If things work out well, I may be at a basketball game tonight, and hopefully, if I can swing it, I'm going to go try to catch William Griffin at Pearl Cone this evening. So there's another one of those big tackles. And if you think he's scary on a football field, how'd you like to have to post that up?
Speaking of basketball, before we turn to you, Matt, a big shout out and congratulations to BJ Edwards and Knox Catholic for winning the state title, beating Kenny Chandler's team for that. So that was an impressive weekend for them, a cool in-state battle between two kids who Tennessee is definitely pursuing in the 21 and 22 classes respectively. But Matt, what else do y'all have coming down the site?
So yeah, like Brandon said, we got all that stuff, and then we will he'll be out again tonight. Tentatively having LASIK surgery on Friday. Could be. We'll see if they'll do everything on the same day. If they don't, then I'll be touring some schools in Atlanta after my appointment. And then Saturday, we've got 7v7 all day. Sunday, we've got Rusty Manziel's MVP camp. And then back to it again next week. We've got about 10 video interviews. Still got 3 or 4 recruiting interviews coming out of this weekend. And then working film room stuff. That's a fun little project that I've had fun with playing around. It's going to be a lot easier to break stuff down a lot quicker. And we got 5 guys coming out this week that we're gonna break down, and we'll just go from there. But it's camp season again. Did finally find out the dates of the opening, which is the big camps that you look forward to. But that's going to be is not really that far away. It's less than probably a month and a half. But May 2nd and 3rd, Nashville will host an opening, and then Atlanta will host an opening. So back-to-back days. So See a lot of probably 70, 80 prospects on those days. So just a lot of stuff continuing to come down the pipe. So Mike Nathaniel said it's $3, and that's cheaper than what you get at Starbucks unless you go with my wife. Then it's a little bit more. Cup of coffee and something else, and then who knows what else we leave with? Some kind of souvenir usually. So yeah, we appreciate your guys' support.
Yeah, check out VR2.site. We are RockyTopInsider.com. They have Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search for them at VR2. We also have Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and a YouTube, which is where a lot of you listen to this podcast. Just Rocky Top Insider on all of those as well. We appreciate you all listening, and until next time, this has been another episode of the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast.